Last one. Oh! Oh! Oh, we got one! Let's go!
It should have been me, not him!
We won the 55th!
It's not fair!
So my dudes, Valkyrja. Today I want to talk to you about Seele. I'm going to be giving you guys a Seele guide, but I want to ask you guys a question that I'll be answering and giving you my opinion in at the end of the video. It's going to be the title of this video, so a lot of you are probably already curious, but to you guys, do you think Seele is overrated? Do you think people rate her too highly compared to where she should be? Or do you think that maybe she's underrated, or maybe she's as good as people think she is? Let me know what you guys think. I'm going to weigh in my opinion towards the end of the video, so if you're curious for that, I'm sure I'll have a timestamp for it. But I want to go ahead and give you guys a guide on Seele. Now, I know I'm super late to it. I know I'm the last one to show up to the party with a Seele guide, but Seele's banner leaves in less than a week. Why are you doing this? Well, a lot of people want me to make mine, so I'm going ahead and making mine, especially with me being at level 70. So you guys will get a good idea of where I'm at and what the end game looks like, and where I think she belongs and where I think she falls in. So I can tell you guys all of that. But that's the guide I'm going to be making today, and soon a Jingyuan guide's coming soon. So let's go ahead, let's get into it. Going to give you guys an overview of her kit, going to talk about her skills, how it synergizes, everything. So first thing first, we have to go to her skill, and the first thing I want to cover is the talent, because everything goes around this basically. Enters the buff state upon defeating an enemy with a basic attack, skill, or ultimate, receives an extra turn. Basically, she gets a reset. That's what we're just going to refer to this as. So throughout the video, whenever I mention resets, just know I mean resurgence. While in the buff state, the damage of Seele's attacks increases by 52%. This goes up to 80%. This is very important to keep in mind. 80% extra damage whenever you have it max for free to play. Whales that have the Eidolons can get this all the way up to 100%. So for one turn, enemies defeated in the extra turn provided by Resurgence will not trigger another Resurgence, just to keep people from having infinite turns. With current HP percentage of 50% or lower, reduces the chance of being attacked by enemies. While Seele is in the buff state, her quantum res pin increases by an extra 20%. This is all through traces. Nightshade and Lacerate are through traces. And in the very last trace, Rippling Waves, after using a basic attack, Seele's next action will be advanced forward by 20%. Pretty good. All in all, really good traces. But then we get into her ultimate. Seele enters the buff state and deals quantum damage equal to 340% of her attack to a single enemy. Very high multiplier, and the very key thing here is the fact that she enters the buff state, because whenever she's in that state, she maintains that state for the rest of the turn. Because here, if you read very carefully, in the middle of Resurgence, while in the buff state, damage to Seele's attacks increases by 52% for one turn, as in the entire rest of the turn, if she manages to get a kill. Ends up being very, very strong if you can manage it correctly. And now her skill, which is what you're going to be doing 90% of the time, increases Seele's speed by 25% for 2 turns and deals quantum damage equal to 143% of Seele's attack to a single enemy. I only have it level 4. It can go much higher, and it's a very, very hard-hitting ability. Basic attack, well, just regular basic attack, just does a little bit of quantum damage, and it allows you to save a skill point. And then using her technique allows her to go invisible, gain stealth for 20 seconds. While she's in stealth, enemies cannot see her. And for the first turn she's in battle, she has Resurgent state. She has a reset state. So it's a pretty strong technique whenever you're going in. It gives her that extra damage percent bonus on her very first turn. So you can try to get a one-shot, so you can try to reset, gather resets. And if you can get resets, she can really, really, really pop off. So now I want to talk about combo sequence order and why it's important for her. What I mean is the order in which you use things that are available to you, because she is a very skill point hungry character, and it's very important to get your buff state, get into your buff state as soon as possible. So I'm going to kind of list the order in which you want to do things, and this is kind of what you want to follow so you can maximize the amount of resurgence buff you actually have to try to deal as much damage as possible. But you're going to want to do things like this. You want to ult a weaker mob. You don't want to ult the elites. You can ult the elites if there's weaker mobs, but that's mostly try to finish them. But you want to ult the weaker mobs to 1, get in resurgence state, and 2, trigger an additional. Now, if there's multiple weaker mobs and an elite, you're going to use that additional to tag the elite, and then you're going to try to one-shot the next weaker mob while you're in resurgence state with the skill, and then try to get another additional to tag the elite again, to try to clear out the weaker mobs and constantly tag the elite. Now, if there's only the elite, you still want to ultimate first to trigger Resurgence. That way you can be in Resurgence for the rest of the turn, and then you can also tag them with a skill after to help build your ult bar back up. At 120, it's not the most expensive ult, but it is still very, very pricey of an ult for energy cost. Now, next we get into light cones. Obviously, her best light cone is her own light cone in the night. I don't have it, so I gotta show you in the data bank. But increases the wearer's crit rate by 18%, while the wearer is in battle for every 10 speed that exceeds 100. The damage of the wearer's basic attack skill increased by 6%, and crit damage of their ultimate is increased by 12%. It can stack up to 6 times. Incredibly strong. Obviously, you have to summon for it. I personally don't recommend summoning for 5-star light cones, but you can. You absolutely can, because it is a very, very strong weapon. Next up, to me, her second best weapon is Cruising in the Stellar Sea. It just gives a ton of crit rate, so that way you can kind of focus. We're going to look at it at max level at SI5, simply because this is something that you can get the SI5 free to play. It's very, very good. You get it from the SimU. It's a very strong weapon, but we're going to go ahead and get into it. Increases the wearer's crit rate by 16% and increases their crit rate against enemies with HP less than or equal to 50% by an extra 16%. When the wearer defeats an enemy, their attack is increased by 40% for 2 turns. Basically, 32% free crit rate and 40% attack whenever you kill something. Whenever you're talking about a character that functions off resets and wants to constantly get resets on their attacks to trigger a buff, 40% extra attack while getting a reset is very, very good. And not to mention, having that 32% crit rate, it allows you to have much more flexibility inside your actual relic build and your stat balancing. That way you can just focus more so on scaling damage with crit damage. It just allows a lot more flexibility inside your relic build, so you're not trying to catch so much crit rate in the stats, and you can run a crit damage chest piece instead. And the final one, sword play. Now, the way swordplay works, it is absolutely insane. You can get somewhere up to 80% damage if you can get all 5 stacks going. With Seele, the way she works and the way she gets resets, you got to remember, this activates for every hit on the same target, which means every hit of Seele's skill will give you 1 stack. So if you hit multiple times with her skill, you're going to get multiple stacks depending on the amount of times you hit. This applies for any hunt character. So any hunt character that on their skill they can do multiple hits, this is a good weapon for, because they can build up stacks for. It's not as good as it is on Yang-Ching. I think Yang-Ching makes better use of this because of his skill. Instantly gives him almost max stacks. But Seele can also make advantage of this too. If it's over the course of multiple turns, you can focus really hard on the elite, but because Seele is wanting to bounce back and forth between targets, keep in mind that this last sentence will come in. It will be a thing that happens every now and then. This effect will be dispelled when the wearer changes targets. So this isn't the craziest thing on her, but it's still a really, really good 4-star option if you don't have free to play. If you're not using the Hunt Light Cone from the Simulated Universe and you're using Destruction and you don't have the Hunt Light Cone at all, this could be a 4-star option to look into. But it's pretty good in general. To me, this weapon's just broken, and she can be another character that just abuses it. So next up, we get into Relics. Relics is no-brainer. You want the Quantum set, get it 4-piece. And then for the planar relics, you're going to want the 2-piece space sealing station, because it increases the wearer's attack by 12%. When the wearer's speed reaches 120 or higher, the wearer's attack increases by an extra 12%. Just gives you basically a free 12% attack, because anytime she uses her skill, she's going over 120 speed. As for the stats, you actually want to focus on her. For the chest, you want to go either crit rate, crit damage. This is going to be a very basic DPS build. But for the chest, you either want to go crit rate, crit damage, depending on what you need. For the boots, you want to go attack preferably, but speed can also work if you're just trying to get more actions in. Now for planar sphere, you're going to want to go quantum. My quantum's not built up because it's just on the side, and also I don't have the 2-piece of it that I want. And then you're going to want to go attack percent to once again build into that attack. Because of the 80% bonus damage you can get from Resurgence, you can stack a ton of attack on her before you hit diminishing returns, because she has so much tail end multiplicative scaling where she's able to just scale up damage, ramp up damage off of bonus percent, and take a lot of advantage off of attack percent, where a lot of characters in-game builds are going to be looking around like 2.5k, 2.8k attack towards an in-game build. She's going to be able to actually take advantage of having that much attack, and she's going to be able to scale really, really hard with it. So you do want to stack a good amount of attack on her. And now we're going to talk about synergies. Her absolute best synergy, in my opinion, is Bronya, because Bronya has a skill that not only does a cleanse, but it allows her to take another action and increases her damage by 33%. Once again, more bonus damage percent, really, really strong. as well as Bronya's ultimate increases the attack, which is good because she wants attack, and increases crit damage, which is also good for more scaling damage. So pretty much gives Seele everything she wants. The only thing to keep in mind with Bronya is whenever you use this combination in sequence, Seele is already a very skill point heavy consuming character. Whenever you combine her with Bronya, you're going to be eating a ton of skill points, so the other two characters in your team really don't want to be taking any actions. You want the other two characters in your team to really basically function off normal attacks, or be able to just self-fund their ults pretty easily, so you can use them for their ultimates and their normals and pretty much nothing else whenever you're using Bronya. Next up is Welt, and she is good with Welt due to Welt's ability to slow down the enemies. Welt has a really strong ability, and I don't understand why people rate him really low, because he's very good at turn manipulation. He's very good at making sure the enemies do not get a turn at all. And because of that, it makes it so normally what would be a weakness for Seele is that she cannot one-shot the enemies. She ends up losing a lot of value because she cannot proc the resurgence buff. But because of Welt being able to delay the enemy's actions and being able to delay the enemies actually getting a turn even, she can go ahead and take her time to actually build up to resetting and getting the resurgence buff up and running, either using an ult or using other ways. But she's able to go ahead and try to build up getting that resurgence buff up and running because Welt's able to delay multiple turns or delay them in general, and Welt just ends up becoming a pretty good synergistic character alongside Seele. Next up we have Tingyun. Tingyun's very simple. Gives her attack, funds her ult. That's really all you need. It is really that simple. Funds the ult, increases target's damage by 20%, and then her talent also just gives more attack. And then her skill also just gives more attack. It's really not that complicated. Tingyun's a very good synergistic character with a lot of people just simply because of how simple she functions and the fact that she restores energy, and a ton of it at that. 50 energy is a lot. That's about an action and a half for most characters. So it ends up becoming very good for a character that constantly wants their ultimate active to enter Resurgence early and go ahead and start popping off. Next up is another one you guys probably saw coming, Asta. You guys can see where this is going. You just want to constantly buff the hell out of Seele. But basically the way Asta works is for every different enemy Asta hits, she gains 1 stack of charging. For every stack of charging, Asta has all allies' attack increases by 7% up to 5 times. So she can have up to 5 different stacks of charging. And once again, she gets it from hitting different enemies. And at the end of the turn, charging stat count is reduced by 3. So you can get a nice little attack boost. And also, Astral Blessing increases the speed of all allies by 36 for 2 turns. Increases Seele's speed is really good because then she gets more actions. Higher action value, more actions. You pair that with any type of toughness shred, and also the fact that Asta herself is good toughness shred, but you proc a weakness break. Weakness break destroys their action value by about 20%. I can't remember the exact value off the top of my head, but I know it's around 20% action value decrease. So then Seele can actually potentially get multiple turns off or multiple actions off within a single turn due to Asta going ahead and buffing the speed up. Ends up becoming a pretty good combo. And finally, Clara. Clara is pretty good synergistically alongside Seele. In fact, you can literally see my main team here is Clara, Natasha, March, and Seele, although my team's mostly focused around Clara. But Clara synergizes really well with Seele for a couple reasons. One is because Clara actually counters a ton. Due to the way Clara functions, I'm not going to explain Clara's kit too much because I've explained it a ton, but the way Clara functions, she has a ton of aggro value. She can put a bunch of aggro value on herself, and the fact that she can counter and get enemies low, it increases the chances of Seele being able to proc Resurgence off of basics or skills. And then there's also the fact that Clara is just really good for skill point economy because you're really not going to be using Clara's skill all that much. You're mostly going to be using her basic and letting counters do most of the work while trying to keep aggro on her. And due to her counter mechanic, she's actually able to self-generate ultimates quite a bit, which works good because Seele wants to eat all that skill points herself. That way she can generate her ult faster and deal more damage and proc Resurgence more often. You see a recurring theme here. You want to proc Resurgence. So now I'm going to talk about the pros and the cons of running Seele. What issues might you run into? What are some really good things she does well? Well, the pros are the huge damage potential due to resets and the upwards of 80% damage buff per turn. She's also Quantum, so she can proc one of the best weakness breaks, and she's also effective against most major enemies Major enemies are either always affected to Quantum or Imaginary, one of the two, and she's Quantum, she's one of the two, so she's able to actually proc or shred a bunch of toughness. She has good energy generation due to resets. It allows her to just get her ultimate up more often, and also allows her to enter Resurgence state more often, which is really, really good. And now for her cons. Skill point economy can be tough to manage due to her eating tons of skill points for resets. This can be an issue with specific teams, which is why you're going to want characters that are really good, that function off of just normals, that don't really need to use any skill points. You're going to want characters like that on teams with Seele. That way you can feed her more skill points and allow her to excel even more. And then, to me, the biggest point of contention against her is if she's at in-game where she cannot reliably gain resets by killing enemies, her value drops off tremendously with her passive offline. If she cannot get into Resurgence state, she simply is just not doing nearly as much as other characters. But if she's able to enter Resurgence, Resurgence is such a massive buff that she ends up just doing tons and tons of damage. But this is where the in-game gets kind of iffy, simply because there's some times where she's able to actually get into Resurgence by killing off enemies, and then she's able to pop off. But if you cannot proc that Resurgence, she ends up losing a lot of values, which is why I bring up the point at the beginning of the video, is Seele overrated? So in my opinion, I do believe people are overrating Seele. I think as we get further and further into the in-game, she's going to drop off in value in terms of characters that are more consistent, characters that don't need things like resets or really, really pop off, characters that just are fundamentally good and they can have strong turn ones every single turn. I think those are the characters that are really, really going to try to stand up at the very top. And while I think Seele is very, very good, do not get me wrong, I am not saying she's anything less than one of the top DPS in the game. She's absolutely one of the best DPS in the game. It's just people are touting her as this unpower creepable, untouchable monster damage, and this character that's just going to dominate the entire game until the end of time, which I just simply don't believe is true, because I think as we get closer and further into the end game and we encounter tankier and tankier enemies, especially whenever we get leveled 85 plus, where enemies are 1.3 times scaling and it becomes very hard for us to actually get enemies down, she's going to lose a lot of value in my opinion. So to answer the question, yes, I do believe Seele is underrated while being unbelievably strong. So that's my guide. That's what I think. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Let me know if this guide helped you guys out. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.